Good morning, students. Welcome back to your economics class. As usually, we are back with the Indian economic development part. See, as in economics, we are having two books. One was about the statistics for economics. As usual, we have nearly completed here the 4 chapters. And one more, Indian economic development, as we have covered 2 chapters, which are already, it is reduced due to certain reasons that are removed out the chapters. So for further, we are going to continue with the third chapter, that is naming as a LPG. The three words stands over here: liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Here, most probably, you are going to see and look after each and every concepts regarding the three wordings LPG. Here, in general terms, we make the meaning of it differently. But now, in the economics, as as and what we are going to discuss about these three concepts is liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Here, most probably, these three concepts will give you the overview of your economy. Yes. So here, as you can see, Indian economic development, this is the first part of your book. So almost, and one more, it was the statistics for economics. So as we are going to start with this economic reforms since 1991. See, in the previous sessions, as we know that in the previous sessions we completed 2 chapters. In that we have seen the Indian economy on the eve of independence, that is what before independence and after independence, till the year of 1990. Till now, what we have discussed, it was before independence till after the independence, like 1947 to 50, or before that, under the British rule, what all things went across, that we have seen in the first chapter. Okay, then coming to the second part, it was year 1950 to 1990, we have seen, and how many reforms came into existence at that chapter already we have discussed it. And now the same things, it is continued with the third chapter, that is what we are calling over here economic reforms since 1991. So here, this overall chapter or the concept is linked to the previous 2 chapters. Why? Because as we have discussed it, we have seen there a very interesting part, at uh, how our economy was present at the time of independence, then soon after the independence, how we have struggled to get developed, even that we have seen there, and how many reforms came into existence, that we have seen as well. Then further, for this continuation, we have framed new economic policies. What is the reason to these new economic policies? What our economy brought in 1991 year, we are going to see. So here, almost as simple, I am telling you all, in this chapter, new economic policies were framed in the year 1991. That is what we call here as a economic reform since 1991. So as for the things, as you are seeing in the slide, K.R. Narayana says that there is a concession in the world today that economic development is not all, and the GDP is not necessary to measure the progress of a society. See what it means in our economy. If we are developing, economic development is there, we are increasing our GDP, it doesn't mean that we have developed our nation. Yes, what I am saying, it is right or no? See, if we
Yes,
see
sir.
our
Yes,
economy is giving here more and more the gross domestic production, that is what GDP. It is not sufficient to develop our nation. That is what here in this thoughts you can see of the K.R. Narayan. What he means here is concession in the word today, that economic development is not at all, or the GDP is not necessary to measure the progress of the society. Okay, why? Because here we are having many of the drawbacks in our every sector. It may be regarding the agriculture sector or industrial sector or service sector. Many of the things are there. Why? Because in this chapter you are going to exactly know when the reforms came into existence, what all things got changed. Okay, so even here we will be having the background of this chapter in the sense what in the why the reforms came into existence, that you are going to know. That is what background, what we call here most probably. So till now what we have discussed is that is what the reforms which we had taken in the previous chapter, that is what Indian economy in the year 1950 to 1990. Few of the reforms what we have taken into agriculture sector, industrial sector, that we are going to discuss again here further. And most probably liberalization, privatization and globalization will get started. So almost as the thought says that it is not, we can't measure the Indian economic development on the basis of only the GDP, but many other factors are there for that. Okay, so further let's go move forward. See here, this is what we are going to discuss from this chapter. See, our chapter name, the heading is liberalization, privatization, and globalization. See, in this, first of all, you are going to know the background of our reforms, why the reforms came into existence. That you are going to know first. The first part is a background. Before that, we will have certain introduction part as well. Then after that, mechanism implementing the reforms. What made us to implement the reforms? Yes. See, in each and every field, these concepts are almost discussed in the previous chapter. For our agriculture development, we brought into existence the agriculture reforms. Then industrial reforms which took place in the previous chapter. The same, the mechanism of implementing the reforms. We implemented the reforms that we have already discussed, and further we are going to see how we have implemented the reforms. Then further, implications of globalization. Now, what made us to make globalization? Here you need to have the discussion over here. The main concept of this is implementation. After the implementation, we are having implication of globalization. What are the things came into existence in the globalization? Globalization means what it is. First thing, you need to know what is globalization. If we see in generally, we mean that we are opening our economy for other countries to come in our economy and make a trade or business. What it is? Globalization is we are opening our economy for a trade for other countries. Why? Because from the previous itself, we produce the goods, we export it, and we certain goods we import as well. So here, if we see why the globalization implications came into existence, if we are seeing, we are opening the doors of our economy for other countries to come here and make a trade and even run the businesses. Here in detail we are going to discuss in this whole of the chapter, these things you are going to discuss in the name of globalization. Why the globalization was made, you are going to see. Then lastly, impact of reforms on various sectors. As usually, as I told you all in the previous chapter, as we have discussed about Indian economy in the year 1950 to 1990, that time we came across various reforms, which were the reforms about the, even we have brought in the this one new 5-year plans, then green revolution reforms, then agriculture reforms, land reforms were there. Then these were the things in the previous chapter what we have actually brought the reforms. So that is what the impact of reforms on the various sector. Now, which are the sectors? Agriculture sector. We have brought there the agriculture reform. Then industrial sector. Even we have brought the industrial reforms in the previous chapter. Almost we have discussed it. But now the same impact of that reforms we are going to discuss under the heading of this liberalization, privatization, and globalization. On this basis, I would like to tell you the introduction of our chapter. We are going to introduce this chapter by the few of the discussions, what we experienced, why the reform came into existence, we are going to see. before going to this, to the background of reforms, I would like to have some of the highlights, introduction of this chapter. See, one thing, why in the year 1991 we brought the existence of the economic reforms. That was the reason we are going to know. See, in the year 1990, we were having the financial crisis in the year 1990. But it is not a small period of time where in 1 year or 1 month or 6 months, or most probably take it 1 year, you can't get financial crisis or financial problems in duration of 1 year only. It started from the year 1980. It started from year 1980 to 1990, where our economy, the, the management of our economy administration was very poor. Due to that reason, most probably if you see, wherever the development was made in any of the sector, that was not giving a faster output. Fast output was not provided. That's what the reason we could not develop as well. For the development purpose, we brought many of the things into existence, but we could not develop it. That was the reason for that. Then from the year 1980 to 1990, that 10-year period brought a financial crisis. In the year 1990, it was unable to make in any of the payments regarding the expenses what were increased. See, in the year 1980 it started, where from it was a starting point where we got expenses were more than the income. Now, what are the income sources for our government? First thing, there was a taxation. Yes, taxes what they collect, there was one source of revenue. Then other source is what, most probably you can, after that you can say that after taxation you can see the income from the public sources, public sectors, the businesses, public sector investments, that even that was less. So most probably wherever the government took place to develop, the wherever the expenses where the government was making, that were very less, means where they didn't get the sufficient return from them. For that reason it went with the financial crisis. What it means, the expenditure were more than the income. Due to that reason, the financial crisis took place. And the financial crisis took place since from the starting from the 1980 to 1990, 10 years. Why? Because it can't take place in 1 or 2 years. It requires long time period. Okay, that's for the reason. Then further, in year 1991, India met with an economic crisis relating to the external debt, and the government was not able to make repayments of borrowing from the foreign exchange. See, one of the thing, the drawback was, as our nation was devel- starting developing, that time what happens, as we are talking, our expenses were more. When our expenses are more and our income are less, you need to pay the expenses what you have taken. Pay the expenses means the payments from the borrowings what you have made from the other banks, other countries, international banks or institutions, wherever you have taken the fund. See, when you are starting one normal business, we will have one general example for this. When you are starting a normal business, you will not be having the sufficient fund. What you make, you take the uh, loan from the bank. Now even our economy, our government has taken fund from international institutions or bank. That is what one of the international institution was, uh, World Bank, and one more we call it as a IMF. IMF here means International Monetary Fund. These are the two things from where our government is to take loan to pay the expenditures, to develop the expenditures. not the to develop the economy, and even to pay the loans which are been borrowed from the World Bank. It is not only these two, but other countries' bank also. World Bank is there, then IMF is there, from where they have taken the loans. Our Indian government, that is what the economy for development, we have taken the loan from these two, and even other countries' loan. See, now recently, even the Pakistan government is falling under the deficit, means they are facing the losses. Why? Because they almost tried to take loan from the World Bank as well as from the IMF. Okay, what is this IMF? Every time the word I am using over here is International Monetary Funds. It is one of the international institution from where you can take the fund. It is none other than the World Bank itself, what we can call over here. See, even now in the recent days, now the Pakistan government is having the crisis of finance. So even they tried to take the loans from this World Bank, but they didn't provide them the loans. For that purpose, if you see our day-to-day news, you can get overall idea about it. Pakistan government, the president of Pakistan, what he is doing, he is visiting to the Saudi Arab countries and China for one reason. What is the main reason why he is uh, wondering that two countries, from Saudi Arab, he got a loan for paying the deficits what they are facing. That is what the expenditure almost is more, and the income for them as well, it is less. So now from India, whatever the trade between India and Pakistan there was there, almost it is stopped. Even they are went into loss again now. And for other countries as well, they are not having good relations with other countries. Even there they are getting a losses. Means now what is their position now? Even they are facing the financial crisis, and now the Saudi Arab countries have supported them and helped them. They're providing them the loans, and even the China is a good friend of them for now. As we can see in the news, uh, everyone may be hearing the news of India, Pakistan, and one more India, China, how the wars are taking place now, normal, in normal sense now, in China border, how the things went wrong, and what were the fightings went between the army persons. Even that is what few of the things where we are not having good relation with them. Okay, due to that reasons, many of the policies have been changed about the trade as well as the goods purchasing, the import and export. Many of the things have changed from recent 1 or 2 years. These things are going very rapidly, increasing this thing. So we are changing our policies now for them, for specific countries. We are stopped with the things from the Pakistan and as well as from the China. So these are the general things in the economy. We can get an idea from our news as well, how our economy is run and how the trades between, even the trade means it is not only the business. Even in economy we are having going to take the word repeatingly, trade which take place in the one country to the another country. That is what the things are going to take place here. So almost as you can see here in this background, there is no limit to know the information from this field. Economics is a subject where we are not having any of the limits. One after the other, one after the other, we are having many of the concepts linked with this. So as I told you, in the reforms what we have discussed, the same things we are going to implement in the further things. Then has the policies, as I told you, from this whole of the things, that is what foreign exchange reserves which were generally maintained to import petrol and other important items dropped to level that were not sufficient for the even for the fortnight. The crisis was further compounded by rising prices for essential goods. All these led the government to introduce new economic policies which took change in the our development strategies. See, that is what the reason. See, we import petrol from other countries and some of the important goods. Now, our imports were more, but the exports were less. That is what one of the reason. If you can see what we are importing, okay, import are more and export or less. What it means, we are going to pay more and take less. The payment, that is what payment is more, and receipt is less. What we are going to receipt is less. This is more. So now extra amount from where we are going to get, and even foreign exchange reserves, we are not going to pay in rupees. It will be dollar. We are going to pay in dollars. Yes or no? That is what one of the reason the economic, we can say that this one reserves, exchange of currencies, foreign exchange reserves, what we call here, were more. Now at present, as compared to the dollar, nearly 70 to 74 rupees we are paying for $1. At present, I think so, 74 rupees nearly what we are paying for the dollar. This is what you can check it out by going on Google. So this was the fact. Now further we are going to see the background. In the background, what are all the things came into existence. We are going to see. So as usually, the background story of this is what now presently I have discussed. The insufficient balance made us the financial crisis. What insufficient balance means? Here, the expenditure went on increasing. As we can see here, again, the expenses were more. Expenses were more. That is what, and the income was less. This led us to make, this was the reason where we faced with the financial crisis. From the year 1980 to 1990, 10 years we took, and we went for the financial crisis. See, further, the origin of the financial crisis can be traced from the insufficient management of the Indian economy in the year 1980s. We know that the implementation of various policies, generally its administration, the government generate fund from the various sources of the taxation and running the public sector enterprises, and the income more than the expenditure was the more than the income, and the government borrowed finance from the deficit from banks and also the people within the country and the international financial institutions. See, that's what the reason I told you. Our nation is to make imports more. That is what, more imports were there. Imports were more and the payments were more. Then exports were less and receipts were less. And the foreign exchange, as we can see, our value started decreasing. Due to this reason, our value, see, first at starting our value was more, but soon after this financial crisis and all, our value got started decreasing. So at now present, nearly we are having 74 rupees $1. As you can go and check it out. And here, what was the reason for the financial crisis? The expenditures were more and income were less. Due to that reason, our financial crisis went in the year, it started from the year 1980s to 1990s. There was a financial crisis. And for the development purpose, now this money has to be paid. Yes, as this reason, this money has to be paid. We took import of goods that in the terms of their dollar, their currency we have to pay. That was the reason. And now for the payment you require the fund. Whatever the things are there, this import amount, whatever you used to export, that amount what you were receiving was less, and what you were paying for the importing the goods for them in the dollars was more. For that reason, you borrowed loan from the banks, not only our bank, but even the foreign banks, and even the our people, our Indian people, you have borrowed the fund. These were the reasons most probably, as we can see in the background. Then further, development policies required that through the revenue were very low, the government and the overshot the revenue to meet the challenges of the employment, then unemployment, poverty, and the population explosion. See, what was the reason? What was the reason why we uh, were unable to make revenue from any of the sector, earn revenue more from our Indian economy or the any of the sectors of our nation? Why? Because our unemployment level was more that time, as usually in the previous chapter we came across. There were life expectancy also was less, then even the unemployment were more. Then one more point, what I said now, unemployment, then poverty, then one more population exploitation, means there was a large number of population as well. We were unable to remove the poverty out of it, and even with the uh, unemployment rate. Why? Because we started stopping to import goods from others, and even many of the concept as we have discussed it, but just like I need to highlight the points of what we have discussed now. So these were the reasons which took place at that time. Then further, the continuity spending of on development programs, the government did not generate additional revenue. More, the government was unable to generate sufficiently from the internal sources such as taxation. When the government was spending the large shares of income in areas which were not providing im- immediate returns such as social sector and defense, there was a need of to utilize the rest of its revenue highly efficient manner. The income from the public sector undertakings was very high to meet the growing expenditures. At the time, the foreign exchange borrowed from the other countries and the international financial institutions was spent meeting the consumption needs, neither to attempt made to reduce the profiling profligate profligate spending, nor the sufficient addition was made to the boost exports to pay the growth imports. See, the things which are present in your book, what exactly it means, the sufficient things were not provided over here. See, as we could not increase our exports to meet the imported goods amount. See, as I told you now here, as imports were more and these exports were almost less, we could not increase these exports to meet this value of imported goods. The value of this imported goods means what? If you are making 100 crore import, okay, 100 crore import goods, almost there were just like 35 crores or 45 crore export. Now what about other things? Remaining amount, what you used to do? You need to borrow the loan from our Indian banking banks or other countries bank and pay this sufficient amount. What is the sufficient? 55 crore. This was the reason which the financial crisis went. So we tried almost to increase our export to meet this import value, but it was insufficient. That was the reason why we couldn't come out of this financial crisis. Then further, after this, the expenditure, as I told you, the expenditure were more. It started from the year 1980s to 19 90s. This was a time period where expenses were more the sectors which this one our government was holding. Nearly 17 sectors were there where the government were holding. Now, after that, what things went and what the things took place, I'll tell you now. So, as usually in the year 1980s, it started further to the 1990s. In this year, we came across with the expenditures almost were more and the income were less. Then further, what things came into existence here was most importantly we couldn't increase our export to meet these imports as usually. Then further we started borrowing funds from the banks, not only from our nation as well as from the other countries as well. Then further at one stage we stuck with the banks just like the IMF and the World Bank with certain conditions. We required a fund to overcome from this deficit. Deficit means what? The expenses which we got. Deficit word, I will take this. Deficit. Deficit word is there, this word exactly. Almost we wanted to come out of that. So what things came into existence, almost this led our Indian government to listen their conditions. See, they tried and they agreed to give you the loan. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, that is IMF, they kept certain conditions. What our Indian government wanted the fund to come out of this deficit. They kept certain conditions. When they agree to agree for the conditions, that time they provided us the fund. So this is what the reason. So almost our country international fund was willing to lend to India at the year 1990. What the things came into existence 1991. This World Bank and IMF kept the certain conditions. We will provide you the loan, but you have to open the economy for the other countries. That was the main intention, to keep here the reason means the conditions to make trade for other countries as well in our nation. So one of the point in the previous slide as it was there, implications of the globalization means here we opened our doors to other countries to come here and make the businesses trades from our nation. So the economies restrictions were removed out, and even that time liberalization was made. Means they told to the government that your role has to be reduced. Even give or provide certain remove the restrictions on certain trades or businesses. So maximally nearly out of the 17 sectors what government is to hold, they left 15 sectors, they privatized. They made people, the private public, to take over the sectors and run the sectors on their basis. The privatization was made. Then globalization, in that point, most probably we came with the bringing with the new economic policies and removing the restrictions on the trade of import and export. Even that took place in the year 1991. So almost the Indian government approached the International Bank of Reconstruction and the Development, IBRD. They approached IBRD and it is also known as World Bank. IBRD, International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, that we call it as a World Bank as well, and IMF. They applied loan for them, and nearly the loan was 7 billion the dollars This is what $7 billion. To come out of this deficit, $7 billion loan was taken in the year 1991. But at that time, the IMF and the World Bank kept certain conditions. So what were that conditions? You first thing, what they told was, you have to agree with these financial conditions, just like open up the economy by removing the restrictions for the private people, reduce the role of government in the many areas, and remove the trade restriction between India and other countries. The three important points they came into existence. First, it was make privatization, then reduce the government role. That is what uh, liberalization took place, privatization took place, and open the economy and for the world and the other countries, and even to remove the restrictions from the exports and import. These things took place in the new economic policies. So I will like to continue this new economic policy concept in the next class, just like what was the new economic policy and what took place in the new economic policy in the year 1991. So till here, the concepts what are there are enough for today.